Good morning, everyone. This is Senator Thom Tillis calling you from Huntersville, North Carolina. This is our 67th telephone town hall that we focus exclusively on COVID, what we can get, the information we can give you on health aspects, our economic recovery, or any questions that you're most interested in. Again, this is my 67th telephone town hall. We spend the majority of the time hearing your comments or answering your questions. If you've joined the call, thank you. If you press *3 on your touch-tone phone, *3, then you'll go into a queue. If you identify, I will identify you by name and the county you're from. We will unmute your phone. There's no need for your phones to be muted. They're all muted at this time, but we will unmute your phone and you can ask your question. So if you'd like to ask a question here in a couple of minutes, if you press *3 on your touch-tone phone, we'll get you in the queue and get to your question shortly. Just by way of update, I guess the first update is I did test positive for COVID on Friday night. I was asymptomatic. I was actually in the state, was planning on going to an outdoor, small, socially distanced event, but when I heard that one of my colleagues had tested positive, I decided to get a test and canceled that event and found out that I was positive. I was asymptomatic on Friday. On Saturday morning, I had some symptoms, the ones that you all need to pay attention to, some difficulty breathing and a dry cough. But later in the day, my symptoms subsided. I also had a loss of taste for about a few days, but that came back yesterday, and all of my vital signs are good. I've seemed to be getting a milder case of it, but to give you an update now on where we are globally, there are 35.5 million cases worldwide, 325,000 reported over the last 24 hours, and there have been over 1 million deaths. In the United States, we're approaching 7.5 million cases. Those are confirmed by test, 40,000 over the last 24 hours, and we have had 210,000 deaths. In North Carolina, we're approaching 220,000 cases. Over the last 24 hours, over 2,200 cases, and we have had 3,637 deaths. Right now, hospitalizations are more or less steady. They're in the 900 range. At last report, 971 people in the hospital for COVID. That number generally suggests that about 25% of all staffed intensive care beds are available. And I should also mention that intensive care units have not only COVID patients, but people recovering from surgery, traumas, other things that would put them in an intensive care unit. To date, we have completed almost 109 million tests nationally and over 3 million tests in North Carolina. The number of confirmed cases I mentioned earlier is a little over 219,000 cases. Of those cases, as of Monday, and this is only updated on Monday, 193,000 have been reported recovered. I would caution you, though, just because you've recovered from the virus, it doesn't mean that you have other conditions and you're still struggling with it. It just simply means that COVID is no longer present. Some fully recover, but some have lingering challenges that can go on for months or years. Again, with the symptoms, the things to watch out for is difficulty breathing, temperature of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a dry cough, loss of taste or smell. Those are the most prominent symptoms. If you think that you may exhibit some of those symptoms, or you have a reason to think that you were exposed to someone who was infected with COVID, I would encourage you to dial 211. Either contact your primary care physician or an urgent care facility that you go to, or just dial 211. You will get information on where you can be tested and the best course of action. I will tell you, in my case, I have not seen a doctor. After I was tested positive on Friday night, I've been on the phone line with Atrium Health here in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area and have reported my circumstances. So it may very well be if you dial 211 or talk to your doctor, you'll get a test, but then they'll ask you to shelter at home. Obviously, if you have other persons in your home that are not infected, you should find a way to create distancing. In my case, my wife is in my home. I'm downstairs. She's upstairs. But make sure you follow the doctor's recommendations on how best to deal with your healthcare situation, but to also prevent anyone around you from being infected. So again, everybody, thank you. This is Thom Tillis, Senator from North Carolina. This is my 67th telephone town hall. If you'd like to ask a question, if you press *3 on your touch-tone phone, you'll be able to ask a question. Our first question is going to Amanda. Amanda, I think you're in Sampson County. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning.
I believe you had a question about the follow-up to the stimulus.
Yes, I'm a bartender, so as you know, we've been hit pretty hard, and it's really hard to find work right now. But I was just wondering, is there going to be another stimulus for small businesses, unemployment, things like that, the airport, or is that just false hope for people to grab onto?
No, Amanda, I think you can count on it. I voted for a follow-up to the stimulus that would have helped with the Paycheck Protection Program unemployment. Unfortunately, we were not able to get enough votes to get it approved 3 weeks ago, but I believe everybody recognizes that we need to do it. Some, for whatever reason, do not want to vote on it now. I'll be cleared from my COVID quarantine early next week, and I am hopeful that we're going to have a package out, because you're right, Amanda, if you take a look at bars and hotels and some fine dining restaurants, they were the first ones to be shut down, and they're going to be the last ones to open up fully. We have got to provide paycheck protection, extension of unemployment benefits, and I also believe stimulus payments for people who are continue to be out of work, are struggling economically. And we also need to provide assistance to the airlines. Just recently, we all heard the reports about layoffs in the airline industry. They're ready to bring them back, but in the meantime, service to airports like Greenville are going to be reduced. We've got to pass a follow-up to what was called the CARES Act. I've already voted once to try and get it done. And I'll be going back next week and doing my part to see if we can get this approved, because people are struggling. We need to do it. I'm not going to question the motivations for why some people wouldn't vote for the things we all agree on, but we're going to continue to force it. And I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through. We can make it easier if we can just get another version of the CARES Act passed as quickly as possible. So, Amanda, thank you for your question. Next question is from Edna. Edna, I believe you're from Robson County.
Yes. Yes, if he's got any.
Good morning. Edna, your line is live.
Yes, this is Edna Jacobs, and I am from Robinson, and I would like to know when our schools will be reopening.
Well, Edna, I know that the governor has a press conference today. A couple of weeks ago, he did sign an order that allowed elementary schools to open in person if they choose to. And the middle school and high schools are doing more of what they call a hybrid, so some are in classroom and some are virtual. But I, for one, think it was another thing, back to Amanda's question, I voted for $105 billion in relief to schools so they could open safely. I don't think people fully understand some of the challenges of a virtual environment. If you're at a home where you have broadband and you have a couple of PCs, you have a couple of children, you may be able to make virtual work. But if you've got people who are struggling, if you think about a number of people who live in Robinson County, they may not have access to broadband. They certainly don't have multiple PCs at home. If they have several children, it's a real challenge for them. Plus, it may prevent a parent from going back to work because they have to be at home to tend to the children. But the governor has recognized what I think most people believe. Younger children in particular are at low risk. If you've got a child with a serious underlying health condition, you probably shouldn't go back into a classroom setting yet. But a younger, healthy child is not in a high-risk category, but they're at significant risk of losing education if they're not in a classroom environment. Think about children with special needs, children with autism who get specialized care in the classroom in a more limited setting. But the governor has allowed the elementary schools to go back in person. It's going to be a decision that gets made by your local school boards. So it'd be in Robeson County, the school board making the ultimate decision. But they do now have the option to do that because the governor has relieved that restriction. I hope that we can get the additional funding because it means that janitors, school workers, teachers need more personal protective equipment. They need the supplies to be able to sanitize the classrooms overnight in between classes. They may need to use facilities for classrooms so they can distance the children out. And that's why I feel strongly that we have to get the additional resources down to the states to reimburse for them, for the county school boards in particular, to reimburse them for the added cost of opening safely. But I, for one, think that we have to do it safely. We cannot shut down and keep these young children at home. It has its own negative consequences that in, I think, many cases are a higher risk than the potential exposure to COVID in a controlled, safely distanced environment. So thank you for your question, Ed. Our next question, and by the way, if you want to ask a question, if you press *3 on your touch-tone phone, you'll be able to ask a question. Our next question is from Brian, and Brian, I believe you're in New Hanover County.
Yes, I am. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Due to the fact that, yourself and several of your colleagues, the president, everyone has, unfortunately come down with COVID, tested positive. Do you see or are you anticipating being able to continue with, the hearings with Judge Barrett and being able to get her approved?
Well, Brian, we have been conducting what they call hybrid committees since about April, where I am able to dial in and participate in a hearing through, we use WebEx, but think about Zoom or other tools. And the majority of the members have been interacting that way regularly. So we can have the committee hearings. I'll be dialing in on various official matters this week. For the vote, it does require us to be physically present. And in my current state, I would expect to be cleared to be able to travel back to Washington probably somewhere around the middle of next week. So I think that committee meetings, including the Judiciary Committee meeting, will go on as scheduled, and provided that members, Senator Lee and I are the two members on Judiciary who have tested positive for COVID, we're very likely that we will be back in person for some of the hearings next week and for the vote. The vote, and I should mention that the vote is about 2 weeks away from the committee meeting. So we have the hearings next week. We have a procedural step that's called holding over, so we wouldn't take a vote next week. It would be the week after next. And I think that committee business, along with a number of other committees that will likely meet over the next couple of weeks, will be a combination of some in person and some remotely. But in the Senate, we do not allow remote voting, so it will require members to be healthy, be cleared from quarantine protocols in order for us to move forward. But at the current, what we know today, I fully expect that we will move forward. Thank you for your question, Brian. Again, this is Senator Thom Tillis. This is my 66th telephone town hall. If you want to ask a question, press *3 on your phone. Next question is from Jason in Wake County. Jason, your phone should be unmuted.
Thank you, Senator Tillis, for taking my question, and I'm very glad to hear that you're feeling better. My question is regarding, you're welcome. My question is regarding therapeutics and basically the availability of medicines for folks that are having moderate to severe cases of COVID. I was wondering if you could give any sort of update for folks. I know you're getting better, you're asymptomatic, but there are others that have more moderate, more severe cases, and they would like to have the ability to use, some of those more advanced drugs that I fear that only some of the folks that are, of higher means or folks in Washington have access to. And then as a quick follow-up, I just wanted to see if there was also any kind of information you could relay so far as some support for local polling places, folks that, some of our courageous poll workers, unfortunately, are of more of advanced age. And so I was wondering if there's any resources being made available for counties that may be struggling to find staffing for polling places. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Jason, thank you. There's a lot of great questions or great information we can share on that. The therapeutics, in my case, I haven't taken any therapeutics. I did have the classic symptoms on Saturday morning, but they subsided later in the day. There are a number of therapeutics. As a matter of fact, I called a friend of mine last night when I heard that her husband was in an intensive care unit in the Lake Norman area, and he is on a ventilator. He is being provided convalescent plasma. So we are seeing a lot of those therapeutics moving out. This is a regional hospital, incidentally. It's outside of Charlotte. But we are seeing, as they manufacture it, drugs like remdesivir, convalescent plasma, a number of steroids. The steroid that you may hear reported is actually widely available. It's a very old steroid. It was first proven successful, I believe, in the UK. A lot of those therapeutics are moving out. Which one works best for patients are things that doctors are increasingly getting good at. And Jason, they're already doing, I had it described to me last night by the wife of this gentleman that's in the intensive care unit, that they are sharing information even about the physical handling of the patient. There was a lot of experience that came out of New York's horrible experience in how to handle the patient, how to position them when they're on a ventilator. But a lot of those, the therapeutics, number one, when they're approved for the use of COVID, many of these drugs have proven to be effective and FDA approved for other illnesses. The doctors have the discretion to prescribe them under compassionate use. What we're trying to do is clear the hurdles to get them specifically FDA approved so that we can provide them more broadly and not leave it up to the doctor to make a compassionate use decision. But the steroid treatments, remdesivir, various steroid treatments, convalescent plasma is increasingly available across the population. I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing a decline in the mortality rate, because between the techniques and the medicines they are getting out there, a lot of it has more to do with just manufacturing to scale, because you have to think about these manufacturing facilities also dealing with COVID, people out of work. But I am seeing just more and more reports of it getting out even to regional areas, like the case of convalescent plasma for my friend's husband. On the polling locations, I have heard a report today for Mecklenburg County, or not today, over the weekend, that they are more than staffed for what are now a substantial increase in poll locations. There's additional resources that have been sent down to the boards of elections to make sure that they have social distancing. You're seeing that in the way, if you think about normally when you go to a polling location, you'd be up close, everybody would be in line. They're encouraging social distancing. A lot of the lines in these facilities will be outdoors, and personal protective equipment, gel, hand sanitizer. And I know this could probably be on a Board of Elections by Board of Elections basis, but at least in Mecklenburg County, I heard the chair of Board of Elections say that they're even providing you with a stylus that you're able to sign your name and then use that same stylus to have a touchless interaction with the voting machine. I would expect that that's in a number of counties, not necessarily all of them, because they're executed or managed by the local boards of elections. But what we're being told right now is that the chairs of the boards or the heads of the boards of election feel like they have the resources. We are expanding early voting locations to provide for fewer people showing up at any one location. And I still encourage people to use the option of an absentee ballot. So, Jason, I hope that answers your questions. They were all good ones. Thank you. Our next question is from Greg in Columbus County.
And my question is, rest homes in North Carolina, when will they open up back for visitation? I have a daddy my daddy's in the rest home down there in Lake Waccamaw, and I've normally, before this stuff started, I was getting him out of the rest home every weekend. Not been able to get him out or do anything with him, and them folks is like they're locked down, you know. I was just wondering when, if at any time, that they'll be able to be, you know, to get out and you know, I don't know if things going to ever get back to normal, but get back to living, I guess, what you would call a normal life, you know.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I for one believe things will get back to normal, and it's going to take time. But I will tell you, the governor a couple of weeks ago allowed individual nursing homes to make a decision about visitation. So if you haven't contacted the nursing home, you should, because it's now in their hands. They're no longer under a government order. Before, they had to do it, and they did it for the right reasons. The governor did it for the right reasons. We saw seniors facilities being where the majority of deaths were occurring. But now that we've got cleaning protocols in place, social distancing, the governor has now said that the individual facility can make a decision to allow visitations, whether or not they allow you to take them out of the home versus just maybe go outside if it's a pretty day and visit with them on the grounds of the facility. But all of those decisions are now in the hands of that nursing home management. So I'd make sure you give them a call. You got to be very careful. Make sure you're bringing hand sanitizer. Make sure you don't have any symptoms. I'm sure they're going to require temperature checks, a lot of things for you to get inside the facility. But they now are in a position. This is something I worked on a few weeks ago after I had a discussion with a man at a farmer's market. His wife has Alzheimer's. He lives in South Carolina. She's in a facility in North Carolina. And he said it was just horrible because that was a connection that she had that was missing. So we made some inquiries, and we found out the governor was going to relieve the restrictions. So make sure you call the facility. Sounds like you're a good son visiting your dad. Excuse me. You should be able to get back in the facility. Greg, thank you for your question. Next question is from Jason in Orange County.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Jason.
Hello. I was just making sure you can hear me. I know there's a little delay.
Yes, sir.
Hey, so I run a small retail business in Orange County, and I employ 6 people. And throughout this whole ordeal, I've been forced to decide between the economic stability of my business and the health of my employees and customers. And as the months have dragged on, I've watched my neighbors lay off their employees and close their businesses. Our town has already lost legacy businesses that have thrived for decades, and many more barely cling to their existence. I'm doing my job every day to serve my customers and to serve my employees, because that's my job as a leader, is to serve those around me. And my question is, when will the people in the federal government do their job to provide for our community the way that I am working to provide for my community?
Jason, did you get a PPP loan?
I did, and that ran out in about 6 weeks, as it did for all of my neighboring businesses. 6 weeks is not very long. I mean, that money is long gone. And without continued support, without a renewal of that, again, I'm being forced to make a decision between the health and in some cases the life of my employees and my customers, and just trying to survive, trying to kind of pay my mortgage, No,
I agree. No, the reason I was asking is that I agree with you. I've said that I'll vote on provisions that I don't like, but if it gets us back to another allocation of money for the Paycheck Protection Program to allow people like you to apply for another tranche, to expand it to include nonprofits like YMCAs and others that were not included in the first version of the CARES Act, to extend unemployment through the end of December, to provide education, $105 billion to safely open up schools, to provide vaccine research, additional funding for vaccine research. I voted on that about a month ago. We came up 8 votes short of getting it out of the Senate chamber. I'll be back in Washington next week after I'm cleared on COVID protocol. I hope that we have another vote on it. And we can get enough people to recognize that every provision that I voted on is consensus. We've got some differences on maybe some of the level of funding to states that we can debate later. But that bill that I voted on is a consensus bill by Democrats and Republicans. But 8 members were not willing to vote on this measure because of other priorities. But if your priority is keeping your employees in place, making payroll, extending unemployment, providing funding to safely open schools, providing funding for vaccine research, providing some indemnification for businesses like Hello?
We can hear you, Senator. Go ahead. Everybody, it looks like the Senator briefly lost service, so we will resume momentarily. I'm going to place the call back in music hold just in case until we get the Senator back on the line. Thank you so much for your patience. One moment, please.
Jason, I'm sorry I got interrupted in answering your question. That was the very diligent Atrium surveillance line that for some reason broke my line, but I'm back, and I hope you heard most of what I said. I'm with you. I want another round of paycheck protection loans. I voted for it. I'm going to vote for it again, and I think we should hold anybody accountable who doesn't vote on what we consider to be consensus measures. I have every intention of voting for it. So sorry I broke up on the line. Next question is from Elizabeth in Union County. Elizabeth, your line should be unmuted. Elizabeth has dropped off the line. We'll queue somebody else up. If you'd like to ask a question, press *3 on your phone. But I think her question was about what number to dial for COVID. Dial 211. If you dial 211, it's a 24-hour hotline that will give you answers to any questions you may have about where you can be tested, the safest path for getting tested. They'll ask you about your symptoms, and that's the best line. Also understand now that you can text COVID-NC, COVID-NC to 898-211, and you can also receive general information from that text hotline. But if you have any questions, please make sure you dial 211. Elizabeth from Union County, I'm sorry we dropped your line. I'm sorry my line got dropped too, Jason. Our next question is from Christina. And Christina, I'm not sure what county you're from.
I'm from Moore County. I'm from Moore County.
Good morning, Christina.
Good morning. My question has nothing to do with COVID per se. We have a small landscape business with 3 employees. And in this particular county, it is a golf county. Houses being built everywhere. And we have enough room for a whole bunch of landscapers. But we have an illegal immigrant problem. So we are required by law to have a pesticide license, because you don't want people spraying just random stuff in other people's yards, an irrigation license, insurance, and, business license, and all of that stuff costs money every year and every month. Go to classes for credits and to maintain those credits. But the illegal immigrants that can cut grass, and they do a great job, they don't pay any of that stuff. So my question is what's going to be done about that?
Well, actually, Christina, in response to Jason's question earlier, one of the differences we have with some members in the Senate is that I want to provide paycheck protection loans and extend unemployment, do the things that we know people in North Carolina need to weather this crisis. We have some that would like to give legal status to 11 million immigrants and health care to 11 million illegal immigrants before we're even covering the health care needs of American citizens. That's one of the things that are preventing us from getting this last package passed. I, for one, I know a fair amount about the landscape industry, and I know that you all have had challenges getting people to work, and that you also have competition from some who aren't living up to the standards that you all are as a licensed landscape business. I think that in North Carolina, back when I was Speaker of the House, we passed an E-Verify requirement for any business over certain levels to try and make sure that people who are working were legally present. But I would encourage anybody who's with a business today, like a licensed business like you all, that any consumer check to make sure that they're dealing with a licensed provider and hold people up to the standard of hiring legally present people to do the work. We can have a separate discussion about immigration issues, but right now when you've got over 1 million people in North Carolina out of work, we've got to make absolutely certain that those folks have job opportunities if they want them, and businesses that are licensed, living up to the high environmental standards, the things that you have to do to conduct your business. Consumers need to be aware, and they should ask somebody before they have them do any work in their homes, are you licensed? Can I see the license? And are you using employees who are legally present? Those are reasonable questions for people to ask, and they're fair questions for people like you that are going by the rules. So thank you for your question, Christina. Our next question is from Barry, and Barry, I think you're from Johnston County.
I would just like to know what have you heard on the condition of President Trump and his wife? How are they doing?
Well, Barry, I got a call from the president last night after he was released from Walter Reed. He sounded very good. He's following his doctor's advice, and the first thing doctors are going to tell you is that if your vitals check out, then they encourage people to be at home. In his case, it's the White House, so that you can free up that hospital capacity for other people. I haven't gone to the hospital since I got COVID, but he sounded as strong as ever. I think he called me about 9 o'clock last night, and we talked for 10 or 15 minutes. I think that he's doing well. He will be, as I am, staying at his home as I'm staying at my home as we get cleared for COVID. But he sounded strong, and he's ready to get back to work. And knowing him pretty well, my guess is he's going to even work more than the doctors would want him to. But he's going to do that at home in a safe setting with some of the best medical care you would expect for the President of the United States at his hand if he should need it. So thank you for the question. Next question is from Jerry. Jerry, I think you're from Lee County.
Hello.
Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning, Senator. I hope you're feeling well.
I'm feeling great.
Wonderful. My question is, do you see military suicide as a forefront topic, and what are you and your staff doing to help combat military suicides?
Well, Jerry, I tell you, it was a top topic for me. I serve on Veterans Affairs Committee, and I've co-sponsored and helped lead the effort for a bill that was just recently passed out of the Senate that was and out of the House into the President's desk that's focused on trying to reduce military suicide. But I'll tell you, Jerry, since the COVID crisis has come on us, the social isolation, the uncertainty, the fear, our suicide crisis hotlines among veterans and among the civilian population is about as high as it's ever been. Military veterans, an average of about 20 veterans commit suicide every day in this country. And it's much higher than the population as a whole. And there are a lot of reasons for it. It could be the trauma that they experienced in combat. It could be the after effects of a traumatic injury. It could be traumatic brain injury, PTS, any number of factors. Pain is also another one. I've been working more recently over the past couple of months helping surge a device to particularly amputees and veteran service members who are veterans who have chronic pain to try and relieve the pain with non-opioid alternatives because they create their own risk. But this has been something since I've been in the Senate that I've focused on. And a part of what we're trying to do, Jerry, I also serve as the chair of the Personnel Subcommittee on Senate Armed Services. What I'm trying to do is get to a point to where we may be able to predict someone is at risk of suicide before that veteran would ever even know it, based on their military experience. Were they injured? Did they witness a traumatic event? Were there other factors that could reasonably leave doctors and scientists to believe that this soldier, sailor, Marine, or airman could be at risk? So we've made progress, but until we can get to the point to where we're not seeing a disproportionately high number of veterans committing suicide, we've got a lot of work to do, and always consider it just another installment on a debt we'll never fully repay. But if you're interested in specific things that I've worked on, the more recent bill that we've passed, I'm working now on something that deals with toxic exposures, which is another potential risk factor for suicide. If you know you've been exposed, you may be potentially experiencing a disease that comes from that exposure. Those are all risk indicators that let us surge attention and resources to the most at-risk service members who are now veterans and active service members. But if you're interested in that information, if you go to my website at tillis.senate.gov, we can send you a lot of information on bills that I've either led, co-sponsored, or other initiatives that we have going within the Senate. And fortunately, this is a very bipartisan priority issue. That's why we tend to make so much progress when we're moving bills forward, separate from all the things you may see on TV. That's an area where I believe Republicans and Democrats are working well together. So, Jerry, thank you for the question. And by the way, if you know a veteran, I would ask you to reach out to them because they are an at-risk population for suicide. If you've got a veteran down the street or you know somebody, do a wellness check. Give them a call and check on them because these are particularly difficult times for them. Our next question is from Heather. And Heather, I believe you're from Pender County.
Of your plan for opening of the schools, I have seen
horrible effects on these children on the mental health standard. And just want to get if you have any kind of concrete plan to move forward to get these children back into a routine and back in the classroom.
COVID who never were infected.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for your patience. It looks like we lost the senator. His line cut out again, so he will be back momentarily. Everyone, please hold, and the senator will be back with us momentarily. Thank you very much.
And Heather, I am back. I hope you're still on the line. I am in my basement where my cell coverage is not quite as good as it is upstairs where I normally do these calls. But I was talking about the victims of COVID who've they never got the virus, but there are victims out there. We see that through increased suicide hotlines and suicides. We've seen it through child abuse, increased domestic violence, increased alcoholism, increased overdoses, that of opioids and other substances. That's why it's so important for us to get away from this narrative of shutting down again. The number of people who have been victimized by COVID is far greater than the number of people who've gotten the virus. I had a mother on a telephone town hall a couple of months ago as a child with a severe case of autism. When that child is in a classroom setting, he's in a limited classroom with a trained professional who can actually provide care to that child. I also believe early childhood development is critically dependent upon the classroom experience and socialization. And that's why I've supported the $105 billion to provide the schools to safely open. I believe that we have to open these schools safely. It has to be done with safe protocols, but the broad consequences and victims of COVID, the only way we're going to be able to address them is figure out a way to safely reopen. And we need to do that in schools. We need to do that in businesses. We need to do it according to the scientists' best recommendations. But I, for one, think that early childhood development, particularly children with behavioral challenges to begin with, and maybe other children experiencing it because of the very different world we're in, the best way that we can prevent even more victims of COVID is to continue to consistently find ways to get them back to a normal classroom setting or in a specialized setting if they're a child with behavioral needs or behavioral challenges. And we've got to continue to press into that. Anyone who thinks that we should snap back and completely shut down our schools, our economies, our society, need to keep in mind that we have to manage a crisis that has victims who are not getting COVID, but they are being dramatically and traumatically impacted by mass closures. You all, I think, because of some of my technical difficulties, we're going to let that one from that call from Heather be the last call. I apologize that our phone dropped twice, but we're going to be doing another town hall this week, and I'm going to continue to do these telephone town halls as long as the crisis continues to try and provide the best information for you. So for everybody who participated on the call, thank you. I am quarantining for another probably 8 or 9, 10 days, and then I'll be back in Washington. In the meantime, I'll be making these phone calls and do everything I can to keep you up to date. God bless you all. Thank you for participating in the call. I hope this call finds you well, and please stay healthy and do your part to prevent the spread of COVID. Thank you, and God bless.